Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Today it's going to be a bit of a different video because I'm going to be talking about my life, or a specific part in my life. Today I'm going to be talking about the series of events that took place that brought me closer to my Catholic faith. I am grateful to God for the experiences that I went through to bring me closer to Him, and my hope is that, potentially it can help you. I see that in my own experience, it can be helpful sometimes to hear the testimony of other people, and all of the good things that have happened in my life, especially that which brought me closer to my faith, is not because of me, but because of God. And so I just love to share what God has done in my soul, and hopefully it can help you guys. And so I think I'm going to start my story in kind of my high school years. I think during my high school years, I was going through a hard time trying to make sense of the world. And, we can even try this now. If we look up to the sky, it's like part of our hearts are going to kind of yearn and ask ourselves, is there anything up there? Is there more to this world than just orbs floating around, planets and stars? Is there meaning towards any of this? And I think that's a pretty natural feeling. We want to see life as something meaningful and not meaningless, because what are we kind of living for in the first place if we don't have meaning? And so, while this is a pretty common yearning in people's hearts, in my experience, I took it to a degree that is probably a bit more serious than how other people would take it, and it really consumed a lot of my energy. I was so desperate to find an answer as to, why we're alive, and as some people might know, I love philosophy, and I've always been a deep thinker, and there was always a search in my heart for meaning. So much so that when I couldn't find it, it was pretty heartbreaking and hurtful. And so that's kind of where my heart was at. I'd say that was probably, maybe freshman, sophomore year of high school. Now we kind of moved to when I was around 15 years old. Around the age of 15, I kind of felt a kind of void in my heart. And this is not rare for me. I also feel like whenever I do have a void in my heart and I try to fill it, that is when God uses me to do great things. And around the time when I was 15, I decided that I'm going to try fill the void with books. And throughout my life, I wasn't really a book reader, but I decided just to read more books. And I believe the first book that I read was this. So around the house, I have a few books by Reader's Digest, which seems like it's like a 1970s, maybe around that era, book, which basically just compiles a bunch of stories. And so here I have Volume 3, 1970. I don't know why we have these books, but I decided to pick it up. This one has 5 books. Maybe you can see it here. But I decided to pick it up, and I read the first book, which is called Operation Sipakik. Operation Sipakik. I think it had a donkey. I honestly forgot what the story was about. I felt pretty accomplished after I finished that. I think I might have finished that part in like one night. But then I continued reading, and I came to the 4th story in this book, which is called The Song of Bernadette. Now, I think part of my recollection of having read this book when I was around 15 years old is not super clear, but what I think I remember was that in one of the pages, it said February 11th. And that is my birthday. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah, on February 11th, 1858, a 14-year-old French girl, Bernadette Subaru, was gathering wood near a deserted grotto in Lourdes. Suddenly, there appeared before her a young lady, her face radiant with love and compassion. But I kind of read this, and it said February 11th, my birthday, and I kept reading, and it just talked about this young girl in France who had visions of a lady. And I remember this was maybe like midnight, maybe 1 a.m. at night, I don't remember. But I remember just sitting in my bed, I was reading this in bed, and I just like paused. I was like, this is weird, mysterious. And you know, part of me having this kind of disposition to find meaning in anything I could, so desperate for meaning, you know, it was definitely a kind of interesting feeling reading this book. Now, I don't know if I ever searched up whether this was a real story. I probably did, likely knowing how I am, and I probably found out that this was a true story. But for some reason, I just kept reading, and I don't recall ever kind of being super immersed in the story after that, even though it was my birthday, or even though the event happened on my birthday, and it was a pretty like mystical story. But I can't say I really thought about it that much. And so that was that. I kind of just left the book going about my day, and I, you know, decided to read more books, and that was all cool. Then the next part kind of shows that the instant the flower bloomed. It was February, I think February 21st of 2021. Just a regular family night that me and my family have every once in a while, where we just have dinner and watch a movie. I can't really say we ever watch religious movies. You know, we're just putting on any popular movie that is popular at that time. For some reason, my mom decided to put a movie called Fatima. And if any of you guys know what happened at Fatima, you'll know that, you know, it's about 3 shepherd children who had visions of the Virgin Mary. I sat there and I was really captivated by the movie. I just felt like the way the movie was made, and how the story was told, I just felt so captivated. It was actually a 2020 version of the movie. I know there's been like a lot of other versions in like the 20th century, but the 2020 version was the one that I watched. And I was so amazed. I was incredibly amazed. And I think part of it was because I had this realization that this is an event that sounds familiar to me. We hear that in 1917, the Virgin Mary appeared in Portugal, based on this movie that I watched. And I must have thought something like, I read something about this before. And quite frankly, I did. I read it from the Song of Bernadette. And so if perhaps it was maybe God or the Blessed Virgin kind of like kicking me, saying, hey, like these things are true. I did this for a reason. I hope you can actually read and actually come to know that these apparitions are true. And after watching that Fatima movie, everything changed. I can remember I had to hop on a phone call with my friends right after. I just went straight out. I was like, guys, I just watched a really cool movie called Fatima. It really was entirely life-changing. Not only did she appear in Portugal, but she also appeared in France. It's like, what? How? How is that? This is not a one-time thing. Mary appears multiple times. It's not only them too. It's, you know, there's Our Lady of Quibejo, Guadalupe. She appeared to Saint Dominic and so many other Marian apparitions out there. Our Lady of Knock. And so I really do think that I had a very strong devotion to Mary at that instant. But I just had a very deep devotion to Mary to the point where, I started wanting to learn how to pray the rosary, which I had never done by myself. And, I just consumed a lot of content about the Virgin Mary right after, pretty much right after watching the movie. I decided to commit myself to reading this book, which my mom actually bought me before I ever watched the Fatima movie. She bought me this because she knew that I was interested in the story. This is basically the full version of this condensed version of the Song of Bernadette by Franz Werfel. And I kind of just read it, and I fell in love with this book as well. And it's really from that time when I first watched that Fatima movie that my world changed. I started turning away from sin. I stopped focusing everything on worldly things. I started praying more. And I started to become a bit more interested in going to Mass. I remember I was watching Fatima at around the COVID time. And so me and my family hadn't really gone to Mass. And I just remember the first Mass that I went to after, taking a break from Mass was, I don't know, I had never paid attention in Mass so much in my life, probably, since that moment. And, I then started this channel, a year or two ago. And, all of who I am now is because in 2021 I watched a movie called Fatima. And I just had a strong devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary since then. And so there's kind of a few points I want to hit. Just looking back, some lessons that, I think it's important for me to understand and maybe for you guys as well. One is that the Blessed Virgin Mary is a very powerful intercessor. I remember not too long ago, maybe a few months ago, my friend was driving me to the train station, and he is also what, we could call a Marian warrior. But he just told me that when I think of the Virgin Mary, I just think beauty, just pure beauty. And I think that's true. In a very, spiritual sense, but, we can even say that the visionaries reported, the most beautiful face we can ever see. And I think that's true. I mean, could we really name any other saint or creature who loved more than Mary? And, if we were to see the Virgin Mary right now, we would probably have our life changed, because just one glance at her eyes, it's so penetrating, and we can sense her deep love for us and for her son Jesus by just a look in her eye. And I think that's so true. And we have to keep in mind that we have such a beautiful soul there for us whenever we need her. We don't need to earn her intercession. We know that she's loving and very powerful. Multiple saints testify to that. And another thing is just that the Blessed Virgin Mary can do incredible things. The apparitions are just one example. But there are many testimonies to, just the rosary, about how, it can change people's life. And like I said, I have, it was only after watching Our Lady of Fatima that I became more interested in praying the rosary. And, we can trust in the Virgin Mary to, help us with whatever it is we need. And finally, this is just my story, and there's a lot of different paths towards conversion. And I think it's important to know that living the Christian life is all about conversion. that's kind of what brings us towards heaven. We need our hearts and souls to be converted in order to be ready to enjoy God's love in heaven. And I remember an interview with Dr. Gregory Stacy, one of my previous videos. He's talked about John Henry Newman and how he kind of gave an explanation of like two different people. One of them kind of just came naturally towards the Catholic faith, and another one kind of went through a bunch of digging and studying in order to find that the Catholic faith was the one true church. And he came to the conclusion that there's not really a better way to find God. And so for me, it was definitely, the Virgin Mary. But for some others, it could be looking into church history. Maybe it could be having that one friend that inspires you and you start feeling interested in what makes them that way. And I could definitely talk about myself, the Virgin Mary just brought me closer to Christ, got me interested, and really changed my life around. And, along the way, I'm going to have doubts. And so, I bury my brain in philosophy and then look into, the mystics. And so I can really say that even in my life, it's just a constant conversion. And I know that even through the hard times, God could really use even suffering to bring us closer to Him. And it's really beautiful how He works. And I think it just gives me hope that, God will always be there with me. And we should always know that even right now, when it feels like we may not be doing anything important in God's eyes, but God can really do things in us when we least realize it. Maybe right now, God is transforming your heart, and I think it's important that we pray. And so that is kind of my takeaway. Please pray to the Blessed Virgin Mary for your own soul, but also for the souls of others. Know that you can always rely on her. And yeah, that's my story. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and share the story with whoever you think could benefit from it. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye.